Hey there. Well, today I'm going to take you into the recording studio for a recording session, and this time the artist is me. I'm going to be doing a cover of one of my all-time favorite songs, Billy Joel's Just the Way You Are. By the way, if you want to skip all of this and go right to the song, you can go right to about here, and that's where the song will begin. I could talk for a long time about this song, about how I used to listen to it when I was a little kid, how I wish I could play the saxophone like that, and how I wish I could sing like that, and on and on and on. The song's got a great backstory too. When Billy Joel and his band were first recording it, they really didn't like it all that much, and their producer Phil Ramone kind of stepped in to say, hey, why don't you play with the beat a little bit, and suddenly the song came together. It's a story that really speaks to the power of a really good producer, which Phil Ramone certainly was. I would highly recommend that you read his book, Making Records. I'll put a link in the description below. Anyway, among the stories Phil Ramone tells about this song, one in particular is when a couple of artists dropped into the studio, Phoebe Snow and Linda Ronstadt. Billy Joel was still a little bit uncertain about whether or not he wanted to release the song, and the two of them listened to the song and went, "Are you nuts? Yes, release this song. This is amazing." But one of my favorite parts is the saxophone solo. This was done by the late Phil Woods. It's an amazing solo, but what's interesting about it is he did not play this solo as it is on the record from beginning to end. That was cut together by Phil Ramone from a bunch of different takes. And no one had computers back then, by the way. This was editing done with a razor blade. Phil Ramone was so good with editing, he actually made people a little bit nervous. He was just chop, 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 chop in there. What are you doing to this amazing solo? But it is what it is, and it's amazing. So anyway, like I said, I could talk about this song for a long time, but let's talk about how I'm actually putting this together. I'm going to take you through the whole process from beginning to end and show you all the techniques that I'm using for each of the instruments, and then at the end I'll show the final mix. So you can skip around however you want. You can look at whatever techniques you find interesting, or if you just want to listen to the song, again, it starts right here. So let's start with the keyboards. I wish I could play, but I can't, so I took the original sheet music and I step wrote this in using MIDI. And I made sure it had the suspension there in the beginning. That's something that drives Billy Joel nuts. I'll put a link in the description below of an interview that he did where the original sheet music that came out had the original chords wrong. It didn't have the suspension. And when he hears people like in a piano bar or something playing his song, they'll see him and go, "Ah, Billy Joel's here, I'll play Just the Way You Are." And then they play it wrong. He goes and corrects them. Can you imagine that? "Oh, I'm playing this for Billy Joel." No, that's not how it goes. And one final note, just in case you're wondering, if you're thinking, were you thinking about anybody while you were singing this song? Of course I was. My wife, Nikki. Okay, so let's talk vocals. The vocal microphone I'm using is a Neumann M147 tube microphone. This is a single pattern cardioid condenser. For vocals, I do one of two techniques most of the time. One of my go-to techniques for vocals is like this, with the microphone raised just above my mouth and then angled down so that the microphone is still on axis with my voice. But this way, all of my plosives and everything go out this way. But for this recording, this song is a bit more of an intimate song. I want to have a close-up and personal kind of feel on the vocals, so I'm going directly on axis like this, just about a foot away, and because I'm this close, I don't want popping peas and stuff, so I'm going to be putting my pop screen right like that. Another obstacle that comes up when recording vocals is singing in tune. A lot of singers come into the studio and then start singing and realize, why am I having trouble singing on pitch? I don't have this problem when I don't have headphones on. It's because you have headphones on. Part of our ability to correct our own pitch comes from the reflections that we get from the walls. But you cover up your ears and suddenly you can't hear those reflections anymore. So a couple of techniques that I use to help people with intonation. One is to put reverb in the headphones, because that will replicate a lot of those reflections that you would hear in an acoustic space, and that helps the singer to correct their own pitch. Another one is to have them just slide one ear off. You're hearing your mix from the playback in one ear, and the other ear is picking up those acoustic reflections. So if you have a client that's having trouble singing on pitch, try one of those two things, or even both, and see if that helps. I want you just the way you are. Color of your hair. Okay, so I'm no Billy Joel. I will acknowledge that. but I think I got the best vocal take that I can here. I did four takes, and then there was one section that I think I did terribly, so I did it over and over and over and over again until I think I got it right, or at least as best as I'm gonna do. So moving on. So now on to acoustic guitar. For my microphone this time I'm using the Rode NT5. This is one of my favorite microphones, especially for acoustic guitar. It's got a nice bright sound. Now before we talk about mic technique, let's talk about all the other things that are important. We're in a good acoustic environment, we have a decent sounding guitar, and I have brand new strings. That is really important. When you're gonna do a guitar part, you've got to have new strings. When you're working with a musician and you ask, when was the last time you changed your strings? And they say, it's time to change the strings. Now as far as the mic technique, I am slightly in front of the guitar and angled back towards the sound hole. Very rarely do you want to put the mic right in the sound hole, because then you end up with just gobs of low end that you end up having to EQ out. Okay, so here we go. Lights. That's better.
3 hours later.
Next, I'm going to do a percussion part, something a little bit different that I've done on a number of things in my labs with students. For the drum, I'm going to be beating on the back of the guitar here, like this. That'll be my kick, and then there's my snare, and then a little bit of tom beat right there. If you EQ it just right and put a nice touch of reverb on it, it actually sounds quite nice, in my opinion. Okay, so next part of the percussion is going to be the shakers, the little egg shakers, and I'm just using a single Rode NT5 for that. Pretty straightforward there. And last is the saxophone. And on the original they used an alto. I'm going to be using a soprano because that's the only saxophone I have. Now as far as microphone placement goes, we try to approach things a little differently in the studio than we do in live sound. In live sound you often see the microphone stuck right in the bell, but that gives a little bit of a nasally sound to it. It's not a really natural sound. Now the reason we do that in live sound is for gain before feedback, but in the studio we can back off a little bit. Now if I'm right in the bell, like I said, it's going to be a little unnatural. And if I'm too close here, it's going to sound a little too snake charmer, kind of, a little too mid-rangey. So right here I've found is a pretty good compromise. We're getting a good portion of the bell, but we're also getting some of the sound off of the fingerboard and off of the mouthpiece. Hopefully it won't be too mid-rangey. I like a nice bright sound. So we'll see how this goes. Okay, after a little bit of experimenting and trying a few takes, I found that I really just didn't like that mic. Just goes to show you that the most expensive mic is not always going to give you the best sound. The one that seems to work for me, and this mic has worked for me before, is the Sennheiser 421. This is actually a dynamic microphone. And again, I'm not directly in the horn. It's kind of pointing towards the horn, but still getting a little bit of the top of the horn as well. I had to play around with that for a while just to get the right placement. I tried up and down and angled and all kinds of different things. So it does pay off to experiment and try different mics and try different techniques to get just the right sound you're looking for.
Later.
Okay, so now all the parts are done and it's time for mixing. I'm pretty happy with it, but I am a little rusty on the saxophone, but
don't imagine you're too familiar.
Okay, so as far as what I did with the mix, I put some compression on the vocals and brightened up the vocals just a little bit. The saxophone, I played around with that for quite a bit when I was trying to get the sound right. I probably could have played with it some more and tried some different mics. Still had a little bit of a mid-range honk to it that I didn't like, so I pulled out a little mid-range with the EQ and put some compression and reverb on that as well. I panned the guitars, hard left and hard right. Also added a bass. Looked like it needed a bass on that, so I didn't play it. I sequenced it with MIDI. So if I had a great bass player at my disposal, I would get them in here instead. Anyway, pretty straightforward mix. Hope you like it, and I'll see you next time.
Don't go changing to try try to please me. You never let me down before. Don't imagine, you're too familiar, and I don't see you anymore. I would not leave you in times of trouble. Never could have come this far. I took the good times, take the bad times. I'll take you just the way you are. Don't go trying some new fashion. Don't change the color of your hair. You always had my unspoken passion, although I might not seem to care. I don't want clever conversation. I never want to work that hard. I just want someone that I can talk to. I want you just the way you are. I need to know that you will always be the same old someone that I knew. Oh, but what will it take till you believe in me the way that I believe in you? I said I love you, and that's forever. And this I promise from heart. I couldn't love you any better. I love you just the way you are. I never want to work that hard. I just want someone that I can talk to. I want you just the way you are.